Just want to do God's will.
What you're seeking is a blessing from God.
You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Randy Robinson here. And as we as a society, and especially as a church, get better at talking about mental health, toxic emotions, the impact it can have on the way you think and on your body. And as we here take the whole man approach that I learned up at Oral Roberts University many years ago, we look at body, mind, and spirit. I have a question for you. And if you read the title, you're going to know the answer. But if you didn't, hey, what is the most toxic emotion? Well, I have a psychologist here to answer that and to address that, and it's going to be very helpful. His name is Dr. Gregory Jantz, and he is the founder of a place called The Center, a place of hope up in Edmonds, Washington. And so this is someone who deals with people struggling with all sorts of things and helps them find victory over the things that plague us, freedom from toxic emotions like the one we're going to be talking about today. So I invite you to be a part of the conversation. Chat is open if you're watching live. If you haven't followed or subscribed or hit like, I would invite you to do that. I want to show you something real quick. This is the worst thing for television because it's so reflective. But this is my YouTube award. Not mine. It's Life Today's. A few months ago, we passed 100,000 subscribers. So if you're one of our YouTube subscribers, a special shout out to you. Trying to build Rumble. Twitter looks a little more promising these days, and of course Facebook is solid for us, and we're on Twitch and Lightsource as well, and now podcasting on a lot of the popular podcast formats so you can get the audio. Enough of that. Dr. Jantz, welcome to Life Today Live.
Good to be with you. Those are good numbers. Hi to everyone.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of been a passion of mine here at the ministry, an old legacy ministry that relies on broadcast television. I'm like, we got to get into some new places, and we got to reach people where they're at. So, yeah, it's a nice marker, but we keep pushing. But we haven't quite hit 1 million on Facebook, so hopefully we can do that. And Facebook's gotten a little more difficult in the numbers they show people. But there are some people out there watching now or in the replay that are struggling with this toxic emotion. And your latest booklet called Freedom from Shame, I'm sure you get that one picked up quite a bit. You see a lot of this?
Shame. Well, shame's an interesting word just to begin with. And you mentioned, it's a small little book because our attention spans have decreased. And people want to give it to me in less than 100 pages. Just tell me what I need to know. Yeah. This is one of those 100 pages. I'll tell you what you need to know about shame. And okay, so we deal with 38 years here. We're a facility where people come and stay, whole person, faith-based. And one of the things that we see is, depression. Anxiety is the number one diagnosis in our country, anxiety. So anxiety, depression, addiction. And so when it all boils down to what is it, is there a core issue or something that I really have to break through? There's probably two of them. Shame is one of them. And I probably should define shame. Shame is, in a word, is I feel defective. Something is wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but I feel defective. And it's like I'm inherently, something's wrong with me. That's shame.
My co-host on the broadcast show, Sheila Walsh, who has had her own battle with mental illness. She's been very open about it. She says that guilt says I've done something wrong, and shame says I am something wrong. You concur with that?
I do. And it's so remarkable. I remember here recently talking to Sheila, and she was sharing this incredible breakthrough story of really, ultimately, it was about shame. And feeling like no matter what, I'm not good enough. I'm not really good enough for God. I feel maybe I feel unlovable. I feel that I just can't seem to get over whatever that is inside. And so the word we're putting on that feeling and that sense is shame. And shame kind of, it if you will, it kind of poisons us because it poisons our identity. We don't really know, okay, am I good enough for anybody? Shame kind of lies to you. Shame says, well, you deserve to be treated that way. So that's shame.
Where do you think it comes from? Is it from trauma in childhood, or is it from bad parenting? Is it just a lie from the enemy, or is it something we tell ourselves? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Because I have folks who, they go, I've struggled with depression all my whole life. I've tried everything. But until I had recovery from the core issue of shame, I never got well. You go, well, where does this come from?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, our early bringing up could be substantial. If you've had trauma in your life, maybe it's significant loss. Maybe you lost a parent early on, and you were just a little kid. Maybe there was abuse. But early trauma oftentimes is the starting point for shame in our life. Not always, but oftentimes it is.
Is there any data, do you know, that draws any kind of parallel between the rise in divorce rates in society and the shame that creeps in with children that doesn't manifest for a couple of decades into adulthood? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. And oftentimes that really can happen. You can go, well, I've sure struggled with depression my whole life, for some addiction or food addiction, and I've had these struggles. And it wasn't till much later in your life you connected that to maybe some early childhood trauma or abuse. Yeah. And you've connected those two. Oh, now I'm starting to get it. I get how this does go together. Sometimes if we've tried just to bury, yeah, and ignore something in our life, it kind of springs up in different ways. So I do believe, now I mentioned shame's probably the biggest core issue, and related to that is forgiveness. It is the forgiveness of maybe just what happened to us. Sometimes it's the forgiveness of ourselves. If we have shame, we may have made a long series of difficult or painful decisions. We may have been in a pattern of relationships that were unhealthy, secret addictions, and we've got to come to a point where we go, okay, I have to release all that and forgive myself.
I think that may be the hardest, because it's one thing when you go, okay, my parents divorced so I didn't feel worthy, or
yes, right.
I got into an abusive relationship with someone and they belittled me and I started to believe the lies. But the one that goes, you know what? I know I messed up. I know I hurt people. I know I sinned. That shame, I'm not sure, it might be the most difficult to forgive, forgive yourself. But from a spiritual standpoint, you gotta go. If God is able to forgive us and He's perfect, can we not find someone?
And that is, yeah. And you really described that so nicely, Randy. Thank you, because this really does describe what a lot of folks experience. They go, I could never forgive myself for the things I've done. And then you feel like I'm unlovable. And there's that lie we tell ourselves. It feels true, that says, you know what, God really can't love me. I really am unlovable, and nobody can really love me because I'm unlovable. That's shame speaking. That's the loud voice, the lie of shame.
So, and that's a great way to describe it for someone who may be not sure what my problem is. But if you if you convince yourself you're unlovable, it may just be shame that's crept in. Are there some other telltale signs that shame is kind of what's plaguing you?
Yeah. And I think sometimes we see this. If you feel like you've had a struggle for a very long time, you go, I've struggled with that my whole life. Maybe it's a pattern of really unhealthy relationships. Maybe it's a secret addiction. Maybe it's, I mentioned food. Maybe in secret, I've had this addiction my whole life. And whatever it is, it's something you've tried to keep hidden because you're ashamed of it. And so reoccurring themes in your life, reoccurring patterns, we look at, okay, well, have we ever looked at the core issue of shame? At some point in your life, there could have been something that happened that you started believing a lie about yourself. I can give you a really somewhat simple one that happened to me years ago. I think it was third grade, so that was a while ago. I remember. I don't remember the teacher's name, but I remember what I recall the teacher saying. The teacher said, "Greg, you'll never be good at math. Just give it up."
That's a great teacher.
That was the message. I don't remember the exact words, but the message is you'll never be good at math. From third grade on, man, was I good at math? No. Was I had anxiety around math? When I got to college and I had to take classes like statistics that were numbers, did I have anxiety? Did I have a tutor? Did I have everything I could get to help me get through that? I did, but here's what was happening. One day, this tutor in college said, "You know what, Greg, you're really pretty good at this. You don't need my help." I go, "What? No, I need your help. I've never been able to do math." No, I don't think that's true. And so shame can be a part of our identity, and we start to believe a lie. We believe a lie, and we can carry it for a long time, but there can be a point of revelation that says, okay, wait, maybe that wasn't the truth, and I can get over this. I know that sounds simple, but that's an example of what it can do to you.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, and I think that that's relatable for so many people because, we all struggle with things, or we've had things said to us, and we kind of just take it, and when it develops into shame over something that we don't want to talk about, something that we don't feel bad, we feel less of ourselves about, or to the point where, like you said, we feel unlovable. It really. It damages everything, and I don't know that people realize the power of it sometimes. So before I get to the key question, which is how do we get rid of it, right? I do have one oddball question for you. Most of my questions, I try to throw softballs over the plate. This is my curveball, so just warn you right up front. Because I grew up in, a fairly younger life, fairly strict Southern Baptist kind of culture.
Yeah.
And they would use shame as a tool, as that they would view it as a positive tool sometimes to get people to behave the way that we should as Christians. However, it was oftentimes used on things that had no scriptural basis. To take what will seem kind of a funny example to some people, perhaps, but some people will get it. I was told that there was a band called Whiteheart back in the 80s. Steve Green was the first lead singer of Whiteheart. On their first album, Steve Green was the lead singer.
Okay.
If that tells you anything, how mild it was. But they had one song that had a electric guitar solo on it. And I had to take down my Whiteheart poster off my wall because this music was imitating the world. And I was shamed into thinking that Whiteheart, Petra, and if you listen to Res Band, you were completely lost, right?
Yeah.
Which all changed when I went to a Res Band concert. But my point is that sometimes, even in the church, we can use shame as a coercive tool to get behavior that we want, and we think that it's righteous. So is this a real thing? This false type of shame that in of itself is a lie?
That's such a great example because it really creates a false guilt.
Yeah,
makes me feel bad about something that really I didn't need to at all.
You shouldn't feel bad about it. Right? I know. I had too much of that, and anyway.
Yeah. That's okay. I grew up in the middle of the sunflowers in Kansas in the Bible Belt. And I grew up in the little country church where I went to the altar as a young man every Sunday because I was just not sure I was saved.
Yeah. You and me both.
Okay.
Right.
So that now, honestly, that created a sense of, am I okay? Do I need to get saved again and again?
So what do we do with that? Because that's not real shame. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. But we start to believe a lie. And I think that's why I always say, shame lies to us. It's usually just the opposite. And we need to just put it in its proper place. If we look at it in a spiritual sense, I think it's a tool of the enemy because it holds us back, it lies to us. And the opposite of shame is really a sense of freedom. I have freedom. And I like to say, I have freedom in who God made me to be. There's freedom. Now, as a human being, we make mistakes. The appropriate thing to do is to seek forgiveness, but not to live with a heavy sense of shame that there's something inherently wrong with you. That's the lie.
All right. So now the key question. What do we do with it? How do I get rid of this?
So, one of the things is there's times where I need to really seek wise counsel. I need to maybe do something more intensively where I really got to look at, because sometimes there'll be a whole pattern. I think of the gal who was told, why can't you be more like your sister? Look at her. And so it started off with comparisons, and you've had a deep wound. And instead of being more like your sister, you did just the opposite. You lived a total opposite life but that's where it started. And so maybe there's the pattern of what did I do to cope with that was unhealthy? I need to address that. It's a chance to radically change a direction in our life. And is it easy? Not easy. Can I do it? Yes, you can do it. And I can tell you that people have aha experiences, and that desire for addiction or that heaviness of depression that just would not leave you, you start to feel a breakthrough.
So now you have this is the website for A Place of Hope for the center. Is it a placeofhope.com up in Edmonds, Washington? How many of you, the people that you see, does shame, is it a central part of what they're struggling with?
Well, we work with folks from all around the country who come in, and at times, the reason why we're called A Place of Hope is years ago, that's what clients kept saying on a feedback survey, that this is a place of hope. We actually changed our name to A Place of Hope. So that said, I think it's a frequent theme. When somebody says, you're my last hope, I've struggled with depression, I've tried every medication there is, this is my last hope, I thought I'd give this a try. That's a person who's probably had a lot of shame. The person who's had a reoccurring addiction in their life. So there is if you will, there's a healing, there's a spiritual side of this that we have to look at as well. Some of this feels for the person that's never felt worthy, they've never felt lovable, they've never been happy with themselves. They look in the mirror and there's a degree of self-hatred towards themselves. So this is radical change. This is radical healing for somebody that's not seen any other way. So it's probably nearly 100% of what we see in those that seek help.
Wow. And it's interesting because you as a psychologist, you are in the area of science, but yet you're dealing with something that can't be held in your hand, hard to quantify, hard to measure. Science is self-limiting because it has to be, and I think if we don't look past that to the spiritual element, you're just not going to ever get there. My 2 cents. So what someone who may be watching right now who has gone, okay, man, this guy's he's nailed my situation. I am dealing with shame. What do they need to know today that will set them on a right path?
One of the things you might want to do is on that website, aplaceofhope.com, there is a fairly extensive depression and anxiety test or questionnaire. It takes a little bit of time because it's really extensive. It's free. It's confidential. only you can see what you're doing on it, and it's going to give you a score. I'm going to give you some free downloads as a place to get started. I want to know, and it's important for you to know, how many of all these symptoms am I experiencing? And there's a lot of different things to look at. And then what can I do today? So it's a gift. It's some digital downloads of just some things to start on. So do something. That's something that free, doesn't cost you anything. You can get going. The other thing is in our little mini book, I have a little chapter called Replacing the Script of Shame. Okay, how do I start changing how I've been living and telling myself the truth? And let me just say, it's going to take some practice. For some, I need to seek some outside help. I need somebody to walk with me. For others, it's so overwhelming that I probably need some more intensive help, like what we do here.
Yeah.
But at some level, begin today to do something. Take a baby step today to do something.
And that sounds simple, but it's huge. Because you're trying to change the way that your brain functions, and it sounds overwhelming, but it's like the old joke about how to eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So it's just taking that step. Now you mentioned something in there that sometimes when we need others to walk with us, and that leads me to another little booklet that you guys sent me right here, and it's called The Power of Connection. And I think this is one thing that in today's, the fast-moving culture, you really think about it, it hadn't been until the last couple of generations that people moved from town to town as freely as we do. We relocate jobs. You can apply for someplace across the country, and some of that may be shifting with the internet, with working at home and things like that. But we uproot a lot, and we don't connect as much as we could. Of course, COVID, anybody that had that tendency, they just got used to being isolated.
Mm-hmm.
How damaging is that to us as people if we're not connected?
Oh, yeah. Isolation. One of the things, through pandemic and so forth, we did a lot of isolation. Mm-hmm. We pulled away from people. We pulled away from support systems. And there was a price to pay for that isolation. Our kids, we had the highest academic failure on record, just for kids. Depression rates skyrocketed. We've never, ever seen the level of addiction that we are still seeing now. In the heat of the pandemic, people were turning to alcohol, drugs, food, you name it, and addiction rates began to skyrocket, and they've remained that way. And so there's a price to pay for what we've done, and you may still be struggling with something that was from a couple years ago or 3 years ago. And maybe you're still struggling and you're in isolation. If you're struggling with an addiction, you do it in private. You isolate. I'm just noticing how much we really do need each other and how important our relationships are, and healing will come through relationship with others. We really can't do this alone. I not long ago, I said it to my wife. I go, when it all boils down to it, I guess what we have is the quality of our relationships. That's what's left.
Yeah.
So let's put a focus on healthy relationships.
I can only imagine that if you're dealing with shame, which is rooted in lies, right? And then you isolate, and especially if you throw an addiction on top of that, even if it's, maybe you wouldn't consider a full-blown addiction, but just some unhealthy habits we tell ourselves, right?
Yes.
The late night ice cream, speaking for a friend. But no, seriously, when you compound shame and isolation, that to me just seems like a toxic cocktail right there.
Yeah. And we want to I call it mood modulate. We want to change how we feel. And so I go to that half gallon of ice cream, in the evening, because it's temporarily changing how I feel. But afterwards, I feel worse.
Right.
But for a period of time, that's so true of any addiction. The more I drink, I feel worse. But there's that short span where I think I feel better, but I end up not feeling better. Yeah. And that's kind of the lie of addiction. So isolation, it's what we feel like doing. If you feel overwhelmed, you feel despondent, you feel in despair, you're depressed, you feel unlovable, well, you just kind of pull away from people. I'm just saying that we come to a place where we've got to get back into relationship, and part of our healing will come through relationships with others. So the power of connections that are healthy. Some connections are not. Yeah. I'm not talking about those. Right. But the power of a healthy relationship, the power of gratitude in a relationship. Gratitude is powerful. As people develop gratitude, we've even done studies on gratitude, studied what difference does it make if a person has gratitude in their life? Well, they live longer, they report less disease, they report happier relationships. Gratitude. Okay, so something that is all comes through the power of connection.
I would imagine, okay, there's a saying that says light is the best disinfectant. And I think one of the lies that holds us back and keeps us isolated is that if I told my spouse, my loved one, my pastor, my confidant friend, especially if they are a Christian and someone, we perceive as having these high standards, if I tell them what I'm really like, they are not going to like me. I find the opposite is true in most cases.
Yeah, we have that underlying fear of rejection that could be tied to shame.
Yeah.
They're not really going to like me. I really can't be in relationship with them. All those lies that are told.
But what I find, and I'm curious if you see this in you're dealing with people, is that we confess our shortcomings, our sins, our failures, our missing the marks with another person, that's where healing is. That's literally what Scripture says, right? Is there some healing that starts to take place when we have a good place to go and say, look, I'm struggling in this area, or I failed in this area, I'm hiding this thing, I'm isolating, I feel shame. Is that one of the steps that you see that often leads people to wholeness?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And it's so important that you've shared this, because having a safe place and a safe person for us to tell the truth, that alone is quite healing. Sometimes we're afraid of judgment, harshness, criticalness, but to be able to really just tell the truth. And people need three things. They need a sense of acceptance or love. They need a sense of feeling understood, and they need a sense of value. And that's why we need to be in relationship.
That's good. That's good. It's so good. And I hope somebody, some people that are watching this, they start to really think about where they're at and have some hope, because there is hope. And taking these little steps, that will actually, you may have just terrifying fear of taking those first early steps, but that's where the hope is. And so I would encourage anyone to do that. Dr. Jantz, I appreciate your time and insight. Is there anything you want to add before I let you go?
There is hope. You said it well, and thank you for that. And if you're struggling today, do take the first step. At least do that extensive questionnaire and get the free downloads.
Yep, and you can do that at aplaceofhope.com. It's on the screen, or if you're listening, aplaceofhope.com. There are a lot of great resources, including the booklets on shame and the power of connection. So do it. Take the step. You will be rewarding yourself by taking that first hard step. So do that today. And if you know someone that will benefit from this, hit that share button. and come back. We've got more for you right here on Life Today Live. We'll see you again next time.
Christ of Nazareth loves you so very much. And if Jesus loves you so very much, surely you are ready now to believe him, to receive him, and to receive the healing for body, mind, and soul.